Welcome to the Dork Forest. Jackie and her pals will never bore us. Shameless confessions
about our obsessions
will make us laugh and smile. So let's explore the Dork Forest and dork out for a while.
Hi, it's Jackie Cation, and you are listening to The Dork Forest. The website's JackieCation.com, DorkForest.com, TheDorkForest.com if you like a determiner. Let's do the credits. Patrick Brady's going to fix this audio and video. Vilmos works on JackieCation.com, and Mike Ruekberg sang the song with his wife, Sarah. He composed it, and he will sing his version of the Mexican hat dance at the end of this show. Thank you so much for listening to The Dork Forest. Here's a scoop. I'm doing stand-up online. A lot of Zoom shows will eventually go back on the road. Sign up for my email list. It's easy to get off. It's harder to get on than it is to get off. And no harm, no foul. If ever bored, JackieCation.com, sign up for the email list. You'll find out about my weekly Zoom shows and stand up on the road eventually. You may donate to the show if you would like. I would like. Sure, I would. There's PayPal, Jackie at JackieCation.com, and there is a PayPal button on both DorkForest.com and JackieCation.com. And there's Venmo, if you like Venmo, Jackie-Cation, oddly enough. If you have listened to all of the shows, go to dorkforest.bandcamp.com, I think. The Dork Forest has a Bandcamp page. You can listen to a lot of ones that are free from pre-2009 when I started pre-recording. And then there's live episodes that cost me a couple of bucks, so I charge you a couple of bucks. There's also some stand-up. There's a story album that's very exciting there. And other than that, I have a lot of merch in my garage. Feel free to order if you know anybody who doesn't have any CDs or the DVD. And you can follow me everywhere at Jackie Cation. Let's get into the show. Hey, it's Jackie Cation. I'm in my garage, and this time it's got to be 10 years since Barder, since you've been on the show. Ollie Barder, game designer, toy designer or reviewer for sure.
Reviewer for sure.
Right.
I sometimes like maybe consultant-ish, maybe kind of.
Okay.
Maybe that's a bit too much. Kind of. I don't know, but mostly reviewer.
Mostly reviewer.
And collector.
Well, and collector for sure. Ollie Barder, you guys. And we're going to talk anime today, but let me tell you, first of all, it's at Cacophonous on Twitter and his YouTube page, which has a lot of toy reviews and action figure kind of information.
Games as well, yeah.
Yeah, CACOPHANUS, and it'll be in the notes, obviously. But it's at Cacophonous on Twitter, and that's his YouTube page. And then he writes for Forbes, Hobby Link, and Mecha Damashi.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah,
not bad, not great.
Yeah, that's fine. Perfect. That's good.
It'll also be in the notes, you guys. That's right, because he's in Tokyo. That's the exciting.
Oh yeah,
that's very exciting. I hear your 7-Elevens are amazing.
Yes, well, that's combinies in general. I mean, all the combinies, convenience stores
are
amazing. There, so you've got like Family Mart, 7-Eleven, Lawson. I mean, they're all. It's like the entire nation would come to a grinding halt if there were no combinies. Basically, everybody.
What
uses
is
them
the
for
word
everything.
you're saying? Company? How do you?
Yeah. So Japanese does this a lot. So they kind of do these they like to abbreviate words. A lot. So something like plastic model becomes Plamodel, and Gundam plastic model becomes Gunpla. So they go.
Oh, gee. All right. Yeah.
And so convenience store becomes Combini. So.
All right.
Combini or Combini.
Well,
yeah, Combini.
It's you know what I'm old enough to remember before we called them bodegas, so it's all working out for me. We can just I usually just call it a 7-Eleven or the local liquor store where I'm going to get some beef jerky. And but I understand that your local companies are really well done. Like it's not triangle sandwiches that are 3 days old.
Well, I mean, the food is a bit sketchy, if I'm honest. But the stuff that, I mean, it's not bad. But I mean, the thing that's very interesting about Combini is that you can also send your post there. You can pay your bills there. You can. So in Japan, they have lots of very kind of strict regulations on what you can and cannot throw away. So if you have something like electrical goods, you have to get a special stamp.
Yeah.
which your local prefecture or borough, they use that, and that's normally where you get them, is from a combini. You also have lots of everyday sort of stationery materials and all other stuff. So it's not just like a local corner shop liquor store with food. It's got everything in it. That's why it's kind of called a convenience store, because a lot of people work ridiculously long hours, so the only time they get to do anything like pay their rent or is like at these places, and they're open like 24 hours. So
that makes sense too then. Okay. Well,
they're everywhere.
And that is the glimpse. That is the glimpse that we have gotten. But let's not take up valuable time talking about how great Japan is and the interesting things. We'll have you back on because I have tried to watch some anime, and I have watched some anime, and I'm reading more manga now than I've ever read, which means two manga. Anyway, but I said that you should pick like 5 of your favorites. What of the ones that you picked, did you try to pick different kinds to show?
Yeah, I did. I did try to kind of mix it up a little bit, because the thing that I really love is mecha anime, as you can probably tell from all the robot toys behind me. And I'll actually send a video of what's in front of me, because what's in front of me is actually crazier than what's behind me.
Okay.
So I'll send that afterwards, because otherwise I have to disconnect everything, turn it round, and it won't.
That's
it'll look hideous. But no, I try to mix it up. I try to kind of pick different things that I thought were, things that I found incredibly interesting, influential. So
that were so pick one.
Well, influential to me, but also like influential to like anime, games, everything. So for example, I mean, like you mentioned, I'm a game designer. I worked on a game ages ago called Strike Suit Zero, and that was influenced by one of the anime that I listed in that. So
which one was that?
I mean, stuff like that. So I mean, from a personal point of view, this stuff has also influenced my work. So
yeah. What's the oldest one on the list? The Blue Future?
No, I think Future Boy Conan is probably the oldest. Yeah.
Okay, Future Boy Conan. What is it about?
So Future Boy Conan is actually quite an interesting anime, because it was actually based on an American novel called The Incredible Tide by a very famous American author called Alexander Key. Now, Alexander Key was also, if you remember the amazing films in the 70s, Race to Witch Mountain, do you remember those?
Yeah, I do.
With the alien kids and all that kind of thing. That was written by Alexander Key. So that was like part of his story. So in The Incredible Tide, it tells a story of Conan, but it's set after a massive, horrific apocalypse. Okay. And it's quite dark and nasty in the way that the world has kind of ended up just completely devastated. And Conan's, I think, quite a bit older, whereas the anime adaptation, Conan's a lot younger. And whilst they kind of go into more detail about how the world's been effectively wiped out by these sort of magnetic weapons that have changed all the tectonic plates, and everything's kind of sunk, and there are very few land masses left. It's the whole story is about sort of how what's left of humanity is trying to resurrect some of the technology that destroyed the world, basically. And Conan kind of gets wrapped up in it by accident. And he kind of ends up becoming sort of very good friends with a little girl that they work with together. And the girl is actually, I think, either the daughter or the granddaughter of one of the major scientists that created the technology or worked with the technology that destroyed the world. But what's really amazing about Future Boy Conan was that it was one of the first anime that everyone knows Hayao Miyazaki worked on. So it was before...
Even I've heard of him. Yeah.
Right. So even this, I actually think this is, if I'm brutally honest, this is kind of like the definitive ultimate Miyazaki anime. Okay. Because it's kind of where he really kind of got, I mean, he did anime before that, but this was like his.
What year is this? Did it start?
1979.
79.
I think 1979. I mean, it's late 70s.
For sure.
But what's amazing, it's a 26 episode series, and each episode's about half an hour long, but it actually watches like a 13-hour movie in terms of the pacing. It's really, really well constructed in terms of the story and the characters. And they really kind of picked a very simple animation art style, but because they kind of kept it simple, they could actually do more with it. Which is kind of like the calling card of a lot of later Miyazaki and Ghibli films, is like the character design's quite, plain.
Yeah.
but because of that, they can actually do more with it because it's not so complex to animate. So, but no, Future Boy Conan is amazing. It's unbelievably influential across all of anime. So yeah.
It's only 26 episodes, 30
Only
minutes.
20, it's completely self-contained. The only bad news is that it's not really available outside of Japan.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. And I don't. I mean,
You would
it's a
have
very
to
strange
figure
thing.
it out.
Yes, figure it out, I think I'd say.
Okay.
But the thing is that was an NHK funded anime. So NHK is kind of like the public broadcast, like the BBC of Japan, basically.
Okay.
And they very rarely do like anime series, and that was one of them, and it's amazingly good. So
and so is it, and it's self-contained, and it's 26 episodes at 30 minutes each, and is it sort of and it really is like the prequel to The Incredible Tide?
No. So it's based on The Incredible Tide. So, but it's kind of a much more, I wouldn't say well, it is more lighthearted. And
Okay.
obviously the protagonist, it's not as dark and depressing, but it's very much based on The Incredible Tide. So
it is dark and depressing, but it isn't as dark and depressing as The Incredible Tide.
I mean,
Fair enough.
yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mean, when you see what's happened to the world and things, that is depressing. But, you know, Conan's a very upbeat kid. He's unbelievably strong as well. So he just kind of puts up with it. So it's, as a series, it's very fun.
Okay.
But
that's great.
So, yeah. But no, I can...
I'm trying to think of like an age, like would 14, if you're into dark anime and you're 14, is it too much?
It's not... No, I to be honest, I think it's because it was shown on NHK. It was kind of meant for all ages.
Okay.
So, I mean, it deals with obviously a post-apocalyptic world, so it's not super cheerful. But at the same time, it is a Miyazaki anime, so
right. So it has hope, which is what he always.
Exactly. I mean, Nausicaa's a good example. Like the entire world's been like devastated by fungal and pollution. So that's a much nastier future.
Right.
But again, I wouldn't call that necessarily dark. There is hope. But I mean, yeah, no, Future Boy Conan's it did kind of set that tone. And you do kind of feel that Nausicaa and then his later film, especially Laputa, comes from that. So
that's awesome. That's so cool. Because the one that I have famously told this story before is I sent the anime of the two little kids walking out of Nagasaki.
Grave of the Fireflies.
Grave of the Fireflies, because my nephew was 8, and I talked to him after, and I didn't. It was the last time I ever gave anything to my nieces or nephews before watching or reading it, and because I talked to him and I said, "Did you like that, the Graveyard of the Fireflies? Because you like that, that animation." He was like, "Yes." It was really sad, Aunt Jackie. And I was like, oh shit, what? And then he told me what it was about. And I was like, I am so sorry. So now
it's not as sad as Grave of the Fireflies. Grave of the Fireflies is heartbreaking.
Yes, it's heartbreaking. It's literally, yeah. So, but the kid I'm thinking of is 14, and that Attack on Titan is one of his, he likes that. He likes that One Piece.
Oh no, he'll definitely like this.
Okay.
He definitely will. And it won't be, it's not Grave of the Fireflies. He won't be emotionally and psychologically traumatized for decades.
Oh, that's fine. He's Laurie Kilmartin's son, so he has already been traumatized. So
no, you'll be fine.
I'm Singer, and she's not even here. Anyway, so is that kind of the oldest one in your list that was sort of influential? It's so neat that Miyazaki worked on.
I mean, the sad thing, what I don't understand is there's a beautiful Blu-ray remaster that's available in Japan. I just don't understand why it hasn't been released outside of Japan, because it's such a great series.
And that's Zone 3, I think, right? Or
no, Zone A. I mean, I think because unfortunately the Blu-rays aren't subtitled, so it's pure Japanese. Sometimes you get English subtitles on some of them, but these are full-on Japanese. But there's Zone A, which is the same as the States, I think.
Okay, but not subtitled. Okay, so make a note.
Pretty hardcore if you want to watch anime that way. So
yeah, that makes sense. What's the next oldest one? I don't want to lead you into. Is it Macross?
I'm trying to remember the list now.
I have Blue Cornet. I have Aurora Battler.
Yeah, I think it's probably Aura Battler Dunbine's the next one. Let me
Okay.
get it out. Yeah, there we go.
Aura Battler Dunbar.
Yeah, Aura Battler Dunbine. Yeah, yes. That is technically, I think that's 82, 83. So yeah, no, that is okay. So that's another self-contained series. It's sort of written and directed by a guy called Yoshiyuki Tomino, and Tomino is sort of, I wouldn't say the grandfather, but he's one of the main figures of what would most commonly be regarded as what would be real robot anime. So in Japan, they have two kind of major definitions of mecha anime.
Okay.
There's super robot and real robot. Now, super robot are things like Mazinger, Getter Robo, and they're basically like incredibly powerful mecha that are effectively invulnerable. They don't really obey any kind of real world rules.
Okay.
They are not vulnerable. Basically the story is normally that the protagonist screams a lot, and the more he screams, the more powerful he gets. Therefore, he destroys things. I'm being very kind of facetious and sort of simplistic.
Right.
And
It doesn't mean you don't love it.
No, I love it. I mean, I'm just trying to give like a very simple explanation.
Yes.
So, I mean, a good example of Super Robot Show I really love is Dankuga. And literally, the more angry the pilots get, the more powerful it gets. So,
okay.
And that is actually like a specific thing that the mecha
that's
does.
Written into it.
Right.
What's that one called?
That's called Dankuga, or I think it's called Super Beast Machine Dankuga, which is available in the States, and the remastered Blu-ray is available as well. That is an awesome series, but that is a Super Robot Show. Okay. So what Tomino did was sort of towards the end of the 70s, he worked on things like so Mobile Suit Gundam, which is many regard as like not necessarily the start, but the definitive real robot anime that kind of dictated what's kind of come since. But Tomino did a lot of other really interesting series after Gundam that were not related, that are very different. So Ideon, which was a crazy super robot anime with a mecha that can cut planets in half and fire black holes and destroy arms of the Milky Way.
Who's making the robots? Or are they
so in the case of Ideon, they're made by this ancient race, and effectively Ideon is kind of like a god. But this is what's different. So when you go to something like Mobile Suit Gundam, you have two sides. It's a civil war in space, and you have the mecha are made in factories, right? Okay. On the opposing sides.
Right.
Now in Aura Battler Dunbine, what was interesting about that is it starts a trend called, it's isekai, which is kind of an alternate reality. So whenever you see things like Narnia, where kids end up in a fantasy world, that is what in Japan would be called isekai. So, and Aura Battler Dunbine is kind of like that, where Japanese motocross motorbike rider is transported to a fantasy world called Byston Well along the Aura Road, and he is kind of drafted into this war between rival medieval houses, which are using these people from Upper Earth, as it's called, to have their auras power and pilot these mecha, which are called aura battlers, and they're kind of built from the carcasses of dead giant insects and dragons. And so
I think you had me at motorbike.
Okay. So I've actually got one here. So here we go. So this is the titular Aura Battler Dunbine. There we go. Woo. And as you can see, he's kind of based on a beetle with a kabutomushi head.
Yeah.
And he's got wings and everything. Oh, he's flopping around. But yeah, so this was a very different kind of real robot anime that Tomino did, and it's kind of more of a fantasy based. But what's interesting is it's because obviously the people from the Upper Earth, come down there from like our real world.
Okay.
And so you actually have this kind of clash of cultures between this fantasy medieval world with sort of very strange technology and then us. And then on top of that, you have the fact that all of the pilots kind of are effectively using their soul to pilot these incredibly powerful mecha.
Right. And then are they grappling, or are they flying and shooting at each other, or both?
Well, they're flying, shooting, and they've got swords and they hit each other. And they also have huge aura battleships later on in the series, which are incredibly powerful. And then there's a big twist, which I don't really want to spoil it, but It's from the 80s, but eventually
it is hard. It's hard to
it's
justify.
from like early 80s, so I can't. But eventually, what happens is the war that kind of ends up consuming Byston Well with all these rival houses. Like the gods of Byston Well effectively push all of them back to the upper earth. So so all of these amazingly crazy sort of mecha and ships end up fighting in amongst, New York and London.
They bring the aura ships back with them to our Earth.
Well, the gods kind of like chuck them out.
Right.
Because they're destroying Byston Well. And Byston Wells, they kind of infer that Byston Wells is kind of like heaven. It's where you go to when you die, which is why when they bring people from the upper earth, that they are, more, their soul is more powerful effectively.
Okay, because that's where that's its home to some extent.
Yes.
Okay.
So that I love. And the mecha design in that I think is groundbreaking, by a guy called Kazutaka Miyazaki, who was one of the 4 founding members of Studio Nue. And it's like, what I love about Dunbine is there hasn't really been anything like that before or since. And the story itself is, again, really cogent. And because it's all self-contained,
like how many episodes of that?
That's about 50. So that's quite a long show. There are a few compilation OVAs where they kind of like try and put it, and you don't really need to watch those. There is a sequel OVA called The Tales of Neo Byston Well, which isn't that great. And that's like set 700 years later, I think. And then there's loads of other spin-offs. So you have things like Ghazi's Wing and then Wings of Reen. But I like the Wings of Reen anime, and the novels are kind of crazy. But I would definitely recommend Aura Battle of Dunbine. That's available on Blu-ray.
With subtitles
with subtitles in the States. It's the full remastered version. That's available in the US. I can thoroughly recommend that. It's an amazing series. If you like, I suppose, Game of Thrones with crazy.
Because it's sort of like royal politics.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, because you have all these rival kingdoms, and then you've got these kind of humans stuck in between, like a motorcycle rider going, "What the hell is this?"
Are we following the motorcycle rider guy?
Yeah, he's kind of, so that's
narrator?
Shozama. He's like the main protagonist. And obviously most of it's him. He's kind of very good at doing the exposition because he's like, what the hell's going on? So that's how you find out what's going on. And he's literally thrust into the middle of this, huge world war. So it's really, really interesting. And while I would say that Future Boy Conan is aimed, like younger kids can definitely watch it. Something like Dunbine, that's really meant for teenagers.
Okay.
You have something called shonen, which is for young boys, and then you have seinen, which is for like teenagers, and that's kind of what this is for. So it's an older kind of. It's not. I wouldn't say, violent or horrible, but it's a more complex kind of story and characterization.
Right, like the other things that I've seen. I mean, these are very basic. These are not, and they're not mechs at all, to my knowledge, or because it's like things like Dragon Ball Z and Naruto, where they just seem to be entirely about friendship and family and hanging in the sky growling at each other.
Those are shonen. So that comes from both Dragon Ball and Naruto comes from a weekly manga magazine called Shonen Jump.
Okay.
And shonen basically means young boys. So it's basically comics for young boys.
Okay.
And that's where Dragon Ball and Naruto come from.
Okay. Yeah. And so you said that the art design on this Dunbine, on the Dunbine show, was sort of, they never did something like it before and nothing since? Not
really. I mean you have fantasy.
Do?
Well, I mean, you saw that. I mean, it's kind of the mixture of this kind of insect aesthetic.
Okay, so it's using more sort of like an animal transformery kind of thing.
They don't transform. Well, some do, but they're not really what I would call a transformer. I mean, they kind of have different modes. One for like high speed flight, but the thing with what is it? Dunbine. The Mecha are. I mean, how to explain? So it's kind of like a streamlined version of, if you found giant insects and you hacked off legs, you would kind of like shape it around. So it's kind of like a more sleeker version of. So they've appropriated the materials that they have access to.
Right.
I mean, and yeah, it just doesn't look like anything else really. It's
Yeah,
really
because most
impressive.
of the mecha stuff are full on robots. They look like robots. They look
Oh
like
yeah,
dudes instead
yeah.
of
I
any
mean, they've got a
kind of
head, arms, legs,
yeah.
body, torso.
It's are they and who's making the I mean, is there one big is it like Micronauts or something? Like who's making the toys for
Okay, so historically, I mean, there used to be a bunch of different Japanese companies like Popey, Clover, but now these days, like the Dumbine I showed you, that's made by Bandai. And what's
Okay.
crazy about that toy, that is of the original Dumbine from the original anime, and those things are selling like gangbusters. So they're still releasing toys now,
Yeah.
decades later, that are still unbelievably popular. I mean, half of the stuff in front of me is from Dumbine. So
And
I've
purchased in
actually
the
got a
last
giant Dumbine over there. But anyway.
and is it been stuff that you've bought in the last couple of years or did you buy it back in the 80s when you
Oh
were
no, this is new
child?
stuff. This is new.
Okay.
So I mean, the old stuff, I mean, the proportions are kind of like they're really square and blocky,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the newer ones, because of improved manufacturing, they can actually get it really close to the design.
Yeah,
And normally they actually have the original mecha designer come in and kind of supervise. So what's interesting is, so Miyazaki was kind of the guy who started it off, and then it kind of shifted into another guy called Yutaka Izubuchi, and his designs are kind of even more organic and sort of outlandish and amazing. And he's been like used to kind of come in and work on a bunch of new toys as well. So I'll bring out this one. So this is kind of quite a complex one. So this is more. Where we go. So this is what's called the Bellvine.
Okay.
And this was never animated. This was in an art book, which they did for the OVA.
OVA stands for.
So the fact that they have, toys of this, I mean, so, yeah, it looks quite different to the Dumbine. So the Dumbine,
Yeah.
I'll get the Dumbine. So the Dumbine is kind of simpler and there we go.
Streamlined and looks very sort of practical. The one on the right does not look practical. What is the...
No. This is actually. I mean, what happens like later on is the mecha become less and less refined and much more powerful. So this is kind of like literally much more organic than the Dumbine. So and just to kind of sorry.
Go ahead.
And just to kind of make things a bit complicated, so just give me a second, I'll just put this down. So in the Dumbine, so the Tales of Neo Byston Well OVA, they have, like the two main mecha are kind of like allegories for the mecha that were in the original series. There we go. I'm just destroying half my collection. Anyway, so this is what is called the Surbine. That's it. And the Surbine, let's move back here. Surbine is kind of like an updated version of the Dumbine.
Oh, okay.
But updated in a kind of a more organic, kind of savage way. So
yeah,
But I have all. I mean, I just have all these toys. It's ridiculous.
You have several toys, is what I'm.
Yes.
What I'm
my apologies. My apologies.
Oh, no.
Too many toys.
But all of the toys that you just showed me are from the Dunbine series.
Yes. Well, yes, they are.
Yeah.
And they're all new. I mean, they've all been released by Bandai in the last 5-10 years. So
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like an amazing show that I would also like to try to watch.
Yes.
What's next? Would it be Laputa or Macross or Blue Court?
No. So let me have a look. I think that's a good question. Probably Macross Do You Remember Love. So that was kind of like Macross Do You Remember Love. I think because that's 84.
Okay.
84. And Macross Do You Remember Love is what is called a Geki Joban, which is like a filmic remix of the original Super Dimension Fortress Macross, which was one of the 3 series that was appropriated into Robotech. So Robotech was made from 3 mecha anime, Macross, Southern Cross, and Mospeeder. And the first part was Macross. Okay. And the movie, Macross Do You Remember Love, is kind of like a retelling of the story of the series. In the timeline of Macross, it's a bit messed up because the way they justify the movie is they say it's a documentary that was made in 2031 about the events of what happened in the series.
Okay.
So, because there are events, so in the series, you have, so the whole thing with Macross is that a giant ship lands on Earth. We don't know where it's come from, but we do know that all the stuff inside is scaled to giants.
Okay.
So we have to figure out how are we going to fight these giants. So this is where the idea for the mecha comes from. And initially the mecha they come up with are called destroids, which are quite simple. They just walk around and shoot things. And then they realize, well, we're going to need something more variable that can deal with different threats. And they end up effectively creating what is the first variable fighter, which are called Valkyries in the original series. In Robotech, I think they're called Veritex. Okay. And they have 3 modes, which is fighter, sort of gear walk, which is like a legs down like a hawk, and then Batroid, which is the mecha mode.
Okay.
And what eventually happens is, like 10 years later, the giant aliens turn up and then lay waste to the Earth, and then the ship, which has now been called the Macross, escapes, and then there's this kind of running fight over the course of the solar system to get back to Earth, because they mess up because they have this hyperspace fold system and they get it wrong and they end up hyperspacing to Pluto. Okay. But in the movie, you kind of cut in halfway through where they're already like at Saturn on their way back. But what's different in the movie is, so the aliens in the series are called Zentradi, and the men are the Zentradi and the women are the Meltrandi. And they kind of have 2 separate factions, but they work together. Okay. In the movie, they are the main antagonists. And the story change in the movie is that the ship that crash landed on Earth was actually a Meltrandi ship. And that's why the Zentradi attack, because they think it's actually the women. So the whole story is actually men versus women, giant women, and humans are kind of caught in the middle.
Oh, okay.
And what saves it at the end is because both these like Mentradi and Zentradi cultures, they're literally clones bred for war. They don't have any culture. So when they're exposed to kind of any kind of culture for the first time, they have culture shock, and it basically, they have this huge war, and music effectively stops the war because they've never heard music before. And in amongst all this, you have all these transforming fighters and all that kind of stuff.
Wow. Okay. In the midst of that long sentence, there was something you said. He was in mech mode. What is mech mode? So the whole thing is because they're giants. Yeah. That's the whole point. Is that you have this effectively what looks like an F-14 Tomcat transform from a plane to a mecha. Okay. And the movie version's a bit different because they actually have like more armor and stuff on. So there we go. Just grab this dude. So this is the VF-1S Strike Valkyrie. There we go. In Batroid mode. There we go. Okay. And Batroid mode is just battering him? Battering
No, Batroid as in the robot mode. They call it Batroid. So this is the mecha mode. Okay. And the Strike Valkyrie is a bit different because it has this cannon on it here, which folds forward and shoot things. But yeah. So this is that's from Macross Do You Remember Love? Yep. And so Macross Do You Remember Love, I love it because like the animation in it is bonkers because they kind of went to town, and it has some of the best animation from the 80s in that movie. I also love the music because it's wonderfully cheesy. But I think as a story on its own, it's a bit of a strange one because you really need to know like the original series beforehand to kind of get what's going on. But I really love it. That unfortunately, I don't think is available in the US because of the complex rights between Robotech and Macross and all this kind of nonsense, which is a shame. But it's a wonderful series, and they have done a Blu-ray remaster, so that's available in Japan, but again, doesn't have English subtitles. So. And
there might be a way to see some of this animation at the very least on YouTube from clips.
Oh yeah, yes. I'm not going to say how. So.
Right. I mean, it's not as good, obviously, and it's not remastered and all as gorgeous. But if you want to get an idea of what Macross Do You Remember Love looks like, you can go to YouTube and go.
Oh no! I mean, you can. Yeah, I mean, they've got like it's slightly spoilery because it's like the major song at the end, which kind of stops the war or finishes the war. I mean, that is on YouTube, and that's kind of classic. But I mean, that song itself is which is called Do You Remember Love, is a classic in Japan. So
okay. And how's the heart on it? I mean, is it just got, I mean, that's what I like about a lot of different anime and manga is that it usually has just sort of, even if the message is very basic, good versus evil, there's usually some depth to it.
Oh, no, there is. I mean, in this instance, so the story's quite, so obviously you've got this huge backdrop of like an interstellar war, effectively. Yeah. But the actual story is kind of based around three people, which is a love triangle, which is the pilot, Hikaru, and one of the commanding officers, Misa, and then the singer, the lady who does all the singing, Mingmei. And initially the story is that Hikaru and Minmei become sort of like lovers, but over time he kind of realizes, that he actually has more, he loves Misa. So there's this huge, because effectively like the entirety of humanity like needs Minmei to sing, but obviously she's brokenhearted, so it's like, no, don't just sing because we're going to die horribly.
Look what it did for Adele. Anyway, every time Adele breaks up, she's got a #1 album. It's right. Channel that. So,
channel it. So she does. She channels it.
Okay.
But that's kind of the story. But yeah, I mean, the whole purpose of, the story of Macross, the original one is really interesting in the way that a culture of war is just empty. There's nothing there. So the purpose of getting exposed to culture is something that is explored quite a lot in the series in a really interesting way. So there's a lot more going on. I mean, like you're saying, it's not like just a simple, gun shoot things.
Right.
There is actually depth to it. Yeah. I mean, Macross is kind of more on the, I would say the spectacle, definitely. But there's still more to it. It's not just a simple sort of.
Right, there's a lot of Big Bang to your book.
There is a lot of Big Bang, a lot of big guns. And I think also the animation for it's amazing in the sense that like the choreography of, because up until Macross you didn't really have this kind of level of mecha choreography, flying through the air, dodging missiles and all this kind of stuff. Macross was kind of famous for this really kind of amazing animation flourish where you have like hundreds of missiles kind of like crossing all over each other. And the guy that came up with it was is a very talented animator called Ichiro Itano. And the missile kind of thing is called the Itano Circus. So whenever you see that kind of really huge like missile barrage, normally it's either Itano has done that or someone is referencing Itano. And that kind of really started in Macross. I mean, he used it in other things before, but Macross was where it really, he went to town.
Right. So. It's always hard to say this is where something started when it comes to something as big as anime or manga or something.
Right.
Because there's very easily someone out there going, No,
absolutely. I mean, in this case, what I mean is that Itano actually worked on Gundam and Idiom before this, and there are elements of like that kind of animation in those series. Yeah. But Macross is kind of where he went. That's when it kind of became the circus, I suppose.
Right. And he goes to town. And who doesn't?
Yes, he goes to town. So.
What? Okay. So how about a little bit of Laputa or Blue Cormet?
Okay. So the next one.
Yeah.
This is 1985. Would be Blue Comet SPT Leisner, which I absolutely have to talk about numerous times because. Yeah, so Leisner is a really, really, really interesting series that I didn't realize was quite so important and influential until I got to Japan.
How long have you lived in Japan?
About 6 years.
Okay.
And I'd seen Leisner before. I thought it was incredibly good. So, I mean, just to give a bit of context. So the guy that wrote and directed Leisner is a guy called Ryosuke Takahashi. And whilst Tomino was kind of the guy who started real robot, mecha anime with things like Gundam and Elgaim and all this kind of stuff, it was Takahashi that made it very, very, not realistic, but believable. So he started off with an anime in like early 80s called Fang of the Sun Dugram, which is all about, effectively guerrilla fighters trying to fight for independence from a Earth Federation, effectively. Okay. And this is on an alien planet, but the mecha they use are all very believable. The mecha, the Dugram, doesn't really have a head in a normal way. It looks like an Apache helicopter cockpit. And what's interesting about Dugram is a lot of those designs were taken and used for things like Battletech and Mech Warrior. So what a lot of people perceive to be like realistic mecha is actually stuff that Ryosuke Takahashi's anime introduced to the world. And then after Dugram, he made another series called Votoms, which is even more brutal and dark and It's set during a 100-year galactic war, and everyone dies horribly. And the Mecha, again, they're based on sort of American Jeeps, so they look very, very rugged, and they're mass-produced. So they're not like prototypes or special. They're just like, stuff that's there.
Right.
And then after that, I think it was Galleon. And Galleon was kind of more of similar to Dumbine, but with a really interesting story twist. So it was a fantasy type mecha anime, what you thought was medieval, but is actually set distant, far off in the future.
Okay.
But because obviously they don't know the difference, that's kind of what happened. And then we come to Leisner. And Leisner was kind of the last of the big four that he did. And Leisner was set in the then future, like early 2000s, where the Cold War was still raging. So Russia and America are still on the brink of nuclear war. And they've colonized Earth and Mars. And the story starts with a bunch of kids being sent to Mars as kind of, peace envoys to kind of help the peace process.
Okay.
And then these mysterious aliens invade and destroy both the American and Russian bases. But one mecha kind of tries to stop it and saves everyone. And that is the Leisner, which is piloted by AG. Now, AG is half alien, half human. And he wants to stop the war between these aliens and the humans. So Leisner is all about this really horrible conflict where children are caught in the middle. For the first half of the series, it's like a running escape to get back to Earth.
Okay.
And the aliens are on their tail the whole way. What's amazing about the first half of Leisner is that, like Future Boy Conan, it's really well crafted story wise. So there's no fat. It's just really lean, and the pacing is fantastic. The animation is also crazily good for a TV series because.
And how many episodes are in this one?
Okay, so this is where it gets complicated.
Okay.
So I'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah,
so
fair enough.
The guy that so Leisner is really interesting because one of the top anime mini studios called Anime R was called in to kind of do the animation, and the main sort of guy of Anime R is a very famous animator called Moriyasu Taniguchi, who did all the character designs for Leisner as well. But he really went crazy on animating Leisner. Now, the reason why I bring this up is that every kind of summer in Japan, Sunrise, which is the studio that owns all these mecha anime, does a cinematic, roadshow where they just show classic anime on the big screen. And whenever Leisner is shown, you go to the cinema and you sit down and you're literally looking at a who's who of Japanese animation in terms of directors, animators, character designers, background artists. All the main people are there because they grew up watching this, and that became I want to animate like that. And what's interesting is but on the outside, before you walk into the cinema, they normally have a big sheet of paper where people write things on it I really like Leisner or I really like Gundam. But on the Leisner showings, because you have all these amazing artists, people spend ages drawing these amazing sort of pieces of art for different characters, Mecha, all this kind of stuff.
Just like a tribute wall? Kind of? Okay.
Yeah.
Every summer?
Yeah, literally every summer. But not every summer do they show Leisner. But whenever they do, it really is strange. Because I've been to other series like Escaflowne or Crusher Joe or Gundam, and I see all this stuff, and you see some people that that are from anime or games, but from Leisner it's just chock full of industry people,
just sort of inside famous industry people.
Right, and everyone is hugely sort of inspired by Leisner, which is kind of where I want to get to the next thing, is that literally so many anime, because I didn't realize this till I got here, was how many anime are influenced by Leisner, how many games are influenced by Leisner. It's ridiculous. And the reason why we're going to talk about how many episodes is it's about 34, 36 episodes, but it was originally meant to be a 50 episode series, but it was cut short in the second season. And there are various rumors about this. So when I spoke with Takahashi, he explained that he said the ratings weren't very good and that's why they cancelled it. However, there are other things where one of the sponsors was a company called Sanyo that made kerosene heaters. And I
Okay.
think during 85 or 86, basically their kerosene heaters killed people. So they had a huge recall, and because of that, their sponsorship was probably pulled from a bunch of different places,
Right.
probably including Leisner.
Right.
I mean, there are newspaper clippings that kind of talk
Sure.
about Sanyo and this kind of stuff. So it's one of those things happened, or both. I don't know, but I'm not so sure about the ratings because they did a recent Blu-ray remaster which sold incredibly well. They're still making toys, so here we go. This has literally just been released recently. So this is the Leisner.
Oh, wow.
Actually, the new Leisner, which has got the chest boosters and all this kind of stuff. What's interesting is the cockpit's in the head. So if I open the cockpit, here we go. Come on, you silly little thing.
So when you get one of these mech toys, do you have to put it together, or does it come on a card?
No. These are all toys. So you don't build them.
No, you don't have to
So I'm
build
actually a toy collector. I'm not a kit guy, really.
Right.
And so there are different types of toys, and one of the toys I really like is called Chogokin, which is basically die-cast mecha toys. So a lot of the inside, like endoskeleton, is metal.
Okay.
And those are much more durable. And normally those kind of ones are used for when you want to do something transformational. So, so Dan Cougar, I mean, I think there's a big Dan Cougar box. No, there we go.
Okay.
And that one, that is just all, inside is die-cast because it combines from like 4 different vehicles. And the 4 vehicles, transform between a mecha mode, a beast mode, and then the combined mode, where like 2 of them end up as feet, 1 of them ends up as the head.
Okay.
So I mean, those use a lot of diecast. So I'm really much a toy guy than I am.
Toy guy, but these mechas, they don't seem to be super. I mean, they do they have a lot of joints or?
Oh no, this is articulated like a crazy thing. Let me take it off.
Articulated. That's the word I was looking for. It has articulation.
So I mean, these legs all moves.
Right. All the legs move,
Yeah.
and
All
the
legs,
hands
feet.
twist.
Yeah, no, the hands twist everything. Yeah, some of them even have articulated fingers, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, right. But no, I mean, all of this they're all posable. So
yeah, that's so cool. That's
I mean, that's why I buy toys, is that you can do that. So otherwise, if it's just like a fixed pose, it's just like that's
a statue. You've bought a statue, and if you like statues, that's a different dorkdom. This is not the dorkdom of Ollie Barder, by the way. I am talking to Ollie Barder. Let's get a pipe in, just to tell you who I'm talking to. It's Ollie Barder, you guys. And if you want, you can go and follow him on Twitter and watch his YouTube channel, which is Cacophonous, which is CACOPHANUS, and then he has written, like, you sent me a list of several reviews and like a lot of stuff about toys and about that you reviewed on Forbes and Hobby Link, and do you review on the Mecha website?
No, I mean, that's kind of, so when it comes to toys and Hobby Link, I mean, that's pretty much what I do. I mean, my specialist subject is Mecha, right? Mecha toys.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's a huge part of pop culture here. I mean, like I said, all of these toys, this is brand new. I mean, they just released this, and this is from an anime series that was, I don't know,
from
85.
Yeah.
85. So, I mean, they're still making this stuff. I mean, so this is another one. So I also got this as well, which is the Zakal, which is the evil bad guy. Basically, anything in anime that's gold.
That is so gold. Look how tinsel that is. That's outstanding.
Yeah, so basically anything gold, you're in trouble. So anyway.
Yeah. Oh, that's a bad guy, the gold.
Yeah.
And
so that's the Zakal. So I mean, that's just been released.
That's why I love that the Dork Forest is now on Zoom, and I have videos for these things, because then people can actually see. I did a 3D printer one, and we got to watch some 3D printing.
That's amazing. Oh, that's awesome.
That was a really fun episode, and
that's awesome.
So Blue Comet, SPT Leisner, and so the story is essentially, what's the story then?
So basically, you have these two. So what the aliens are trying to do is they're trying to make Russia and America fight each other to destroy each other, so they can conquer the Earth. And AG is trying to protect humans and explain, no, it's not the Russians, it's not the Americans, it's these aliens called the Gradosians. They're going to destroy us.
It's so interesting. They could have just left us alone, and it would have happened without any interference at all. And it sounds like the aliens are Armenian. Are they Armenian?
So this is where it gets really interesting. Is the aliens are okay? They're human, But you find out what's actually going on between the relationship between humanity and these aliens later on in the series. And that's really interesting. But this is the problem. Because it was kind of cut short, a lot of the story arc in the second season was kind of not completely finished.
Right.
And they released like a separate OVA to kind of finish off the story, which did it okay. But what was sad about Leisner was that the pacing of the first season was so good. And then the second season, they weren't able to do it the way they wanted. So it kind of doesn't work as well. So it's a bit like Firefly. Like everyone loves Firefly. And it kind of has all of these budgetary problems and the story's so good. And then it just stops. And that's kind of what Leisner was.
Okay.
And Leisner, I mean, Firefly was like influential on things like Battlestar Galactica in terms of how they did the special effects. And like a lot of the story stuff in Firefly has been used elsewhere. To be honest, though, Firefly did actually... I'm pretty sure Firefly has a lot of anime influence on it as well. So things like Cowboy Bebop and Outlaw Star are the two main ones that really come across. Like basically a bunch of people on a spaceship together, going through. Yeah, right.
It's
so
essentially, if Han Solo had a series,
right,
and,
which is kind of more like what Bebop was and Outlaw Star. So, and then there's also
I saw Cowboy Bebop, or I saw one of the movies, Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah, the movie's very good, but I mean the series is. If you watch Bebop Cowboy Bebop's a fantastic series, you should absolutely watch.
Okay.
And Outlaw Star is also great as well. I mean, the whole thing with River in Firefly does come across like a lot of the stuff that they did in Outlaw Star a bit. So I'm kind of curious to see if Joss Whedon will ever admit to saying I like anime. So that'd be fun.
Well, I will say so the two manga that one of my nephews is really into manga. And so in an effort to get Laurie Kilmartin's son some art and some manga that he might like, I asked for my 26-year-old nephew to recommend some manga that he thought would be okay for an 11-year-old who's now 14. And so he turned me on to this thing called Spirit Circle, which is a manga set in a middle school about reincarnation, and it's wonderful and it's beautifully drawn and it's really cool. But the one I'm reading right now is actually, I believe, it was turned into anime, which was Golden Kamuy.
Golden Kamuy.
Yeah,
no, that's on anime. That's on TV now in Japan.
Right,
the anime adaptation.
The manga is amazing and it's gorgeous.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So that's what I'm reading that has anything even adjacent to this. But what about do you want to talk more about Blue Comet?
Well, no, just with Leisner, just to finish off. I mean, unfortunately, it's not really readily available outside of Japan. Hopefully, one day it will be. The reason why I say this is because they recently did a whole re-release of Votoms on Blu-ray, so I'm pretty sure at some point we're going to get hopefully a release of Leisner. There's already an amazing remaster in Japan, but again, no English subtitles. But it's an amazing series, and I really hope it kind of gets. I mean, games like Virtualon, Armored Core, Zone of the Enders wouldn't exist without Leisner. Bangayo, and then anime. I mean, so that's another thing that's quite interesting is that. Like anime, like a lot of Leisner is in lots of other anime. So Gundam 0083, they have a character called Kelly Leisner as a reference to it.
Oh, okay.
And some of the mecha designs are kind of influenced by it. The way the mecha move is also influenced by it. It's normally about how the mecha move, because the way that Leisner does things, it's very acrobatic. And because they have all these verniers all over the thrusters all over the mecha, they can kind of flip and do all this amazing movement. So, but Leisner, absolutely recommend it. Watch it; it's fantastic.
Okay, and we have essentially 10 more minutes to talk about Laputa.
So Laputa, that is technically the first Studio Ghibli anime movie. So this is another Miyazaki movie. But this was probably one of the first anime I saw as a kid, because it was shown in the UK. On Channel 4, I think. Anyway, but it was dubbed into English, and it was, I think I only saw like the last 20 minutes of it or something, but it kind of stuck with me as a kid. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I have to find out what this is. And I eventually found out what it was, and it is by far and away, so whilst Future Boy Conan is by far and away my favorite Miyazaki anime overall, my favorite Miyazaki movie is Laputa, which unfortunately you cannot really say in America or anywhere else with Spanish people.
I've never heard of it. I thought I owned I thought I had all of his stuff. Just
So in America, it's released as Castle in the Sky. So you probably have that.
oh, so Laputa is Castle in the Sky. That's the same.
Yes.
That's the same
So
one?
they can't call it Laputa in America, but they do because it's a very rude word in Spanish. And it comes from Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels, and that was intentional in his...
Oh,
Well, yeah, because that's where the story, kind of the origin of the story comes from. So Laputa is the flying island in Gulliver's Travels.
yeah.
But in the movie, it's a different kind of story. And so Miyazaki actually went to Wales and based a lot of the initial mining culture and landscape on Wales. So when the movie starts, it feels for me very homely because I'm from England. So it's like, oh, I know where this is. And then but the animation's amazing. The story, again, it's I think one of the best stories in anime in terms of just, again, pacing, characters, how it's told, the reveals, everything about it is magical, really. And the animation is fantastic.
I have to watch that one again.
But what I will say is, while I watch the dub, definitely watch the Japanese version with English subtitles.
Okay, because I have the English dubbed version on Blu-ray.
Yeah, but you should be able to switch between the audio tracks.
It might be an extra. Yeah, because
normally on those you will always have the original Japanese audio. But yeah, so in the States and elsewhere outside of Japan, it's called Castle in the Sky.
Okay.
But that is my favorite. And again, so the Future Boy Canon, you had this like young boy, young girl pair that kind of drive the story forward. And that kind of feels like the prototype for what you see in Laputa, which is between Pazu and Sheeta. And they kind of work together to basically find this castle in the sky. But the thing is the technology that put it up there was not all good and nice. So you find out why no one can find it anymore, why the world's been devastated and all this kind of stuff.
This has been addressed in Dungeons and Dragons when you have enslaved an air elemental to fly your ship. This isn't okay. It's not okay.
No.
Turns out the air elemental doesn't just want to do that. It wants to get off and be in the wind. So weirdly enough, something like that. So Castle in the Sky is the one, and try to see it with the and check my DVD to see the Japanese version with subtitles. And
for that one I would recommend, because the voice acting on the original Japanese version is fantastic. So
okay, and because my favorite Miyazaki, weirdly enough, because I don't enjoy bugs, is that Nausicaa one, Valley of the Wind. So beautiful.
You need to read the manga for that then.
Okay.
Because the manga for that is 10 times better than the movie.
Oh, I bet. Because you really can go into sort of
the movie kind of touches on a very small part of the story.
Yeah.
But the manga is amazing. Absolutely. I mean, if you haven't read that manga, that is like the go-to must-read Nausicaa the manga. I mean, you can get the box set for it for nothing now.
Right, and it's online. It's not like, because that's what Eric, my nephew, is constantly like, I don't know why you want to buy these books. There's 100 of them. Or you could just go to this website. And I'm like, because I'm 100 and I like to hold.
I like to hold things.
Yeah, I like to hold a book in my hand.
What's a book? Yeah, I know. I have that with kids.
Yeah.
But the but the manga for that is fantastic. So, but the Nausicaa is a great movie as well. But I much prefer Laputa. I mean, of all the movies that he's done, so things like Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle,
Ponyo loves Ponyo. Ponyo loves him.
Yeah, Ponyo's lovely though.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just sweet, is what it is.
Yes.
Yeah. Even though at one point you're like, oh, Totoro. Yeah. Ponyo, when she leaves her 5-year-old to go help the elder care place, I'm just like, what just happened? Did you just leave your kid alone in a house with a fish?
So this is actually quite a normal thing in Japan. There are kids called latchkey kids that actually, both parents are working and they have a key on their thing. So they walk around Tokyo very, very young age. So
and they're still doing it. They're still doing it because they did the latchkey in America and then they stopped doing it about 10 years ago. And with the introduction of helicopter parents, where they stop scheduling things for their children, and their children never do get to be alone. So it's
helicopter parents. I've heard that term. It's because they're hovering overhead all the time. Right.
Okay, well, literally, we are at an hour. You've done vital work here. I've learned quite a great deal about the Mech toys, and we've got at least 5, and they'll be hard to find because hard to find.
I mean,
in the
some
US.
of them. I mean, about half of them are available in the US.
Yeah.
But,
And that's a good start because they're all seasons long. You're fine. There'll be plenty.
You've got a lot to get through there.
Yes, it'll be, and then we'll have you back, and there'll be 5 more, and and hopefully not 10 years from now. So yes.
No, hopefully not 10 years from now.
Ollie Barder, thank you so much for doing the Dork Forest. Everybody, go to Cacophonous, at Cacophonous on Twitter, and the YouTube is obviously youtube.com/cacophonous. It'll be in the notes. A lot of the links to the different articles where you can find his writings available. Super fun talking to you for an hour. Thank you so much for being on the show.
No problem.
All right, and I'm going to say this like I say it every week. Rangers, take care of each other out there.
My hat, my hat, my hat. They're dancing around my hat, my hat, my hat, my hat. Well, what do you think of that? If it looks like a Mexican hat dance and it sounds like a Mexican hat dance, it's most likely a Mexican hat dance. So take off your hat and let's dance.
Yay! Oh my God. Why don't we just call that as the end of the show?